Welcome to the Behavioral View, presented by CentralReach. Join hosts, Dr. Shannon Hill and Dr. Nissa Van Etten, as they explore cutting-edge topics in behavior analysis with expert guests. Stay informed, stay inspired. This is the Behavioral View.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Behavioral View. This is our February 2025 episode where today I think everybody on this panel is below the Mason-Dixon line. We don't like the cold blast. So if we suddenly turn into snow people and stop talking, you guys will know we are just frozen and we'll be back in the spring. Hi, I'm Shannon Hill, the editor-in-chief at CentralReach Institute. And I am here with my always companion, Nissa.
Hey everyone, Nissa Van Etten. I'm the director of clinical training and CR Institute here at CentralReach.
And we always bring in a third panelist from the company, let you guys get to know who's working behind the scenes here. And typically we bring a behavior analyst, but considering our topic for today, we didn't. So Jamie, you want to say hi, a little bit about yourself?
Of course. I'm Jamie Mish-Smith. I'm an enterprise account manager here at CentralReach, and I'm also a caregiver to an amazing 15-year-old son with Down syndrome and level 3 autism.
Thank you. Thank you. And we have a special guest today who just so happens to have written a book that is parent-facing. So would you like to introduce yourself, special guest?
Thank you. I'm Shahla, Alai-Rosales, and I am a professor at the University of North Texas. I consider myself primarily an applied behavior analyst. And the work that I've done at the University of North Texas, has been what's called a balanced load in academia. I teach and I do research, but my research has always been community-facing. Mm-hmm. And very applied. So that's who I am.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And as mentioned, we'll be talking about supporting parents. So I thought a good question of the day for today might be something that you have learned from a child. Could be your own child, could be somebody else's, but just a lesson that we learned from working with kids or raising them. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I think, first of all, I think of that question. I think most of my lessons have been from children, either from being a parent and a grandparent, but also from the many, many children. I'm 64, so I've been working in the field for almost 45 years, actually. So there have been a lot of children, but I guess there's one common thing that I have seen with several children. And I think of one particular instance with my son and one with a friend's son who is on the spectrum. In both cases, there was something that happened that was sort of awe-inspiring and wonderful. And I love seeing that on a child's face. In one case, it was, if you've ever seen wind farms, this was a little guy that loved fans. And going up over a hill and then seeing like a wind farm was like walking into heaven. And just seeing like the pure joy. And I remember the first time my own son, we went into the forests in the Northeast or the Northwest and like those huge redwood trees and seeing exactly that same look. And I think being able to see that as many times as you can in life is really incredible.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, Nissa, Jamie, ready?
I can. Go ahead, Nissa.
Later, I think, what I've learned, I think from being a behavior analyst early on in my career without children, and then having children and raising children of my own and seeing that the natural growth and development and just the experiences that what I've learned, especially from my middle child, I talk about her often, is that you just can never be too prepared. And there's never a code or a handbook, right? They're just individuals like the rest of us, and they're going to be their unique individual selves. And we just have to provide the best sounding board that we can for them. And they're not going to do the things that we maybe envisioned at birth. And that's okay. And we have to learn. I think my biggest lesson is just to learn to pivot, just be able to pivot and accept who they are at that moment in time.
Jamie, I hope yours is uplifting because mine's a little sad. So I thought I would go ahead and go next so that maybe we can end on an up note. No pressure. But something that comes to my mind a lot with this is kids that I worked with in public schools. Some of them have really been through a lot. And I would get called in to do an FBA and start digging in and talking with the adults in this child's world. That's where I hear everything that they've been through. And the kid doesn't say anything about it. And it just also, I map that onto my own child and things that he's told me like 10 years after it happened, and myself as a child, where I'm still confessing things to my mother. People don't tell us the most important things about them often. And we don't ever, you never know what somebody is carrying around that is affecting them in the here and now. And so, as I said, it's a little bit sad, but when I sit and I'm consulting and the teachers and the principals and the school nurse and everybody is telling me this horrible story about this kid's life, and they still want me to make him do his homework. And I'm like, guys, there's so much more to unpack here. And so I think from the kids, if we can let them teach us about what's really important, and that sometimes small behaviors are a signal that there's something more important going on here. We don't always need to address the question that we're brought in to address. Sometimes we're here to help them identify what the right questions are. All right, Jane, bring us up from that.
Okay, I'm going to try to bring us home. So I think that one of the things that Asher has taught me, it is, and let me appreciate, is as humans, we experience life's ups and downs, but often we see large plateaus in between. And so it takes us a long time to recognize that life is constant change, and that if I'm in a good place right now, that doesn't mean that necessarily I'll be in a good place in 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years. And that bad place I might be in, it's not going to last forever. And because of Asher's learning and growth, I feel like I've come to terms with that, knowing that it's highs aren't going to last forever and lows aren't going to last forever much faster because my plateaus are smaller. They tend to be smaller. And so we have exciting new behaviors and learnings. And then we have behaviors, and those aren't always great. And then we have something new that he does. And so our learning to just adapt to change, I feel like, happens faster, and settling into that and trying to be mindful and, go with the flow. I feel like it has really taught me that. Live in the moment. Be happy for the 10 minutes of quiet in the car that you get if it's not a good day, right? So that's what I've learned.
There's a lot in there. We're going to have a side conversation later, Jamie. I've just got a story to tell you that tricked for me. But let's kind of move on into the reason we're all gathered here today. Shahla, you've written a beautiful book, you and Peggy, and I would just love for you to kind of talk about, for a moment, just give us an introduction to why this book was written. The title of it is Between Now and Dreams. And you have a co-author, Peggy. Would you like to introduce us to her as well? That'd be great.
Yeah. Well, so the book is Between Now and Dreams, Responsible and Responsive Parenting in Autism. And my co-author, Peggy, has been many things. Probably the most recent that's part of this book is she is a science journalist and a science writer. She also has an adult son who is autistic. Um, and she had written another book called She Sam Run about his early years. And Peg and I met, I can't remember how old Sam was, maybe 3 or 4. And I was pregnant with my first child. We had been friends for almost 30 years. And I actually didn't ever formally provide services. We live in a small community. And over the years, we did a lot of things together, like police education programs for kids with autism, toy lending libraries for families that were economically vulnerable and didn't have access to things. Um, and then things that had nothing to do with the world of autism. Our kids were at the same jazz fest, performing or whatever. And some of our kids are roughly the same age, so we intertwine. But we have been friends, comrades in arms, and colleagues in many different areas. So it took us about 10 years to write the book. We didn't feel a hurry about it, but it all started. Peg worked a lot with Parent to Parent, which I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a really wonderful organization supporting parents in advocacy and parents of all different children. Anyway, I had been doing this talk on ethics and decision making. I don't know when it was now, like the early, I don't know, 2010 or something like that. It was a long time ago, but I was doing this talk and I was telling her about it over coffee or something one day. And she said, oh, we should do something like that for Parent to Parent. So we did a version of it and then we presented it. And it was 2010 because I'm remembering what else happened then. So we drove to San Marcos, this little town south of here, and we presented and we shared a room because neither of us have a whole lot of money. And it was late at night and it was dark and we started talking. We had 2 beds in the room. We started talking. And at that time, my father had just passed away. Her husband was killed in a really tragic accident. And there were so many things that had happened in both of our lives, and we were just sort of processing it. And there is this belief in part of our family's culture that when you pass, that there is a link from the next world to you, and it's not with the communication that that we think of like we're communicating right now, but there's a support. And similar in my belief system, we started talking about that and talking about how, when the baby is in the womb, they become familiar with your voice and your feelings. And so when they come out, there's familiarity. And so we just started talking about all those links. And then as time went on and becoming grandmothers, we started thinking about like, well, what links, like what have we learned in the process of having children and grandchildren, working with children with a whole range of neurological differences and behavioral differences, our own and those I worked with professionally and those she supported in Parent to Parent. And we started talking about like, well, what would we share? Like, how would this presentation we just did they were kind of guideposts at that time. How would we share that with other people? And is it worth sharing? So we started the process of writing and either sitting in my office or at her kitchen table. And anytime there was, we called them the bumps, where we didn't agree or we saw things differently or we saw the world seeing things differently, we would talk and unpack and contextualize until we found like harmony in how we put everything together. And so it went from 8 guideposts to 3 powers. and the book really focuses on first trying to give some context. The book is for parents, but we also wrote it for behavior analysts to win because we felt like so really it's written for both. But it was to call, I think, respect and honor for the parent's role and the parent's responsibility. That's why the title is, I think I'll just speak for myself. When I was 22 and starting to work with kids, I don't think I understood that we have a lifespan. I understood it obviously because I had a degree in child development, but I didn't understand what the span of a life means and what it means as a parent. I didn't understand, I'm going to be gone and who's going to watch over, Or when my parents both passed away, I really still feel sort of like an orphan because I would ask their advice. I would look to them, even if I didn't always agree, but they were part of that continuity that Peggy and I had talked about. So I think it was a little bit the book of trying to provide the context and honor parents, and then also to examine how that interacts with a field that has changed a lot. What is happening in behavior analysis is changing in many ways. And it's not really good or bad, but it is an evolving thing. And how parents interact with that and understand what it means for their child. Um, and then what power parents have. And that's why we settled on the 3 powers, which are the power to learn and be in learning communities, the power to connect with all kinds of humans who can be part of your community to support you and your family, and then the power of love. And, that's not something behavior analysts usually put as a title in their book. But it's really we get this from many great thinkers, many great spiritual traditions, that love is the animating force. It is the thing that we yearn for, the thing that we work for, the thing that we all want in different ways, and under many, many conditions. So we focus on those 3 areas, and throughout it, we tell stories. A lot of stories about Sam because he gave us permission and he's awesome. But also stories that are kind of composites. I was really careful. And I have to be careful and pause, not to give the details of the real group of children that something is about. But, after 45 years, you have a lot of kids and you can put together 4 or 5 kids in one scenario that still is truthful. We really did try to be truthful in the emotional behavioral sense, even though we were changing details. So I don't know. That's the quick summary. And yeah.
Well, I could easily hijack this conversation. I'm going to make sure everybody has room, but one thing that I wanted to really make sure, you said it's written for both groups, behavior analysts as well, and that was definitely one of my notes. Is about halfway through. I'm going to be really honest, Shahla, okay? When you first said to me, the book is very different, and then I started reading it, and for the first, I don't know, or listening to it, I'm an audiobook person. For the first hour or so, I'm like, it might be different for behavior analysts, but it's not different in terms of other fields, right? Until then I started hearing the stuff that is different. And what I wanted to comment on is behavior analysts need to read this book for many reasons, but one of those was the complete absence of sarcasm. I think you guys did a beautiful job of taking on some topics that are difficult, that separate parents from behavior analysts, and really unpacking those in a way that, and I did not hear one smidgen of sarcasm, which is, it's hard. Sometimes even, I try really hard not to, but it even comes out of me sometimes. And I'm talking about things like using pseudoscientific approaches, parents, the whole thing about your attitudes when you're responding to people who are giving you advice. I thought that's on the other side, right? You guys did a beautiful job of unpacking with parents all these different ways you can respond when you're getting solicited or unsolicited advice. So I think from both viewpoints, you just did a beautiful job of that. And I would love for more behavior analysts to read that and be prepared for that.
You know, I have a few tears. I don't know if you can see them on the camera, but thank you for seeing that, because that is a really strong value with both Peg and I. And it helps that we're both parents and we're both professionals, but we also are both people who are very candid about what we think, and people who like to dialogue and find deeper truths. Like, we kept looking for deeper truths. And one of the deeper truths is, whenever snarkiness or sarcasm creeps in, usually it's a flag for some misperception, some bias, some fear, something that's not healthy. And so, like, we may have had moments of that, and we may have had pet peeves, because I hate going into a meeting with a professional and they say, "Oh, she's the whiner," when they're talking about like a parent,
Yeah.
or, he's the biter. It's like, wow. First of all, people are dimensional. And second of all, why are they whining in front of you? Like, what is happening? So, and I
Such a
think
good
that's
question.
really one of the beauties of behavior analysis, is that, like, we do try to look at the conditions under which something happens. And in the best of worlds, we don't cancel people or human beings. What we do is try to figure out, like, what's the higher truth and how can we all get to a better place. And I think for Peg and I, those are both really strong values. And we kept, you know, every time we bumped, we would talk through it. But also, because I love, in fact, you pointed, I have a lot of favorite sections, but that is one of my favorite sections, about the hazardous and the halcyon attitudes. Like,
Mhm.
what are the attitudes that help us lift, expand, and find joy? And what are the attitudes that will destroy parts of us and destroy parts of the people around us? And what we were encouraging families to do is to kind of begin that process of self-reflection. When are you in a place where you're more in contraction and destruction mode rather than an expansion and joy mode? And to use your own emotions. Like, I think when I feel sarcastic, and I hate to say this because I'm not proud of this, but when my use of the F word goes way up, um, I know, whoa, that's a flag. Like, there's something going on that I need to process and figure out. And I don't use it at people, but I kind of use it in another way. But in fact, I don't think I ever use it at people, but I do effing this. And but like, and that's another theme in the book, is that we learned a lot from Israel Golddiamond and his colleagues, that emotions are important in themselves. Like, we like to feel happy, we like to feel joy, we like to feel excitement, like all of that. But they're also flags for particular contingencies of reinforcement and contingencies of punishment. And those are really important things for all of us to be aware of. Like, when we're feeling a certain way, what does that mean about the environment, our skills, and what's happening?
Yeah. I
But
love
thank you.
that. Right. Yeah. That's great too. You're reminding me of a conversation I had with someone where I said, something's wrong. I don't like something. I haven't figured out what's wrong with me yet. But internally, I can tell you something has happened today that I did not like. And apparently, I hated it so much I can't even think about it yet. But my body is telling me something's wrong.
Yeah.
And the next day, I knew what it was. Let me do a secret word really quickly for our CEU seekers. The first secret word is going to be support, SUPPORT. Jamie, I hope you don't mind that I shared that I'm about to share a quote from you. This book filled my bucket. What? Tell us what filled your bucket. So, as I have been listening to it, because I've also listened to the audiobook, my first thought was every parent needs to be handed this book upon diagnosis, because you immediately feel lost. And this made me feel I was in a community And even though I've found my community, I've created the community around my child, it wasn't as easy when he was diagnosed in 2012 maybe? I don't know, as it is now even to find community. And so as I was listening to it, the reminder to keep learning and to keep connecting and to, like you said, come at things with my love of Asher. Really, every time a point was made, I could directly reflect that into my life and what I'm doing with Asher currently or in the past. And it was pretty amazing. And I actually did also think to myself, it would be good for the BCBA and the parent maybe to even read it together, which I know that kind of, or have had the BCBA read it and provide it to the parent even, because it gives examples of how to connect, and connecting helps us find places to learn, I think. So I just really loved it. And it reminded me, when we connect, you have to find the places that new, I guess it's like a TikTok challenge. We listen and we don't judge. That challenge. So while where people go back and forth and say things, what's amazing about the communities that you can find on online and sometimes locally, but mostly online, is for the most part, you can find groups that have to do with your child with disabilities and the specific experience they're having, that listen and don't judge. They listen what's going on. They provide feedback. These are the things that have worked for me. And I love going in there and providing feedback to parents of younger kids, because it is just a huge knowledge share. And I can't even imagine doing this without social media at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know how I would have done it. And so all of that just connected together for me. So
Thank you.
yeah.
I want to say too, like, and we mentioned this before we started, but Peg, I think, literally sat in her closet and recorded all of that with, like, I don't know, blankets or something. And she has worked in radio, so, like,
You
she
can
knows
tell
some
her
things.
voice.
Yeah, she
Very
knows
calming.
things about that. She's also worked performing, because in the life before journalism, she was a, like, high-level musician. So, but it was an act of love for her to read that in her closet. And
Yeah.
then we made a decision. We had been with a great publisher in the beginning, and then we made a decision to switch to self-publishing and just make everything as free and accessible, or as at low cost as possible. And part of it was because of knowing the need to connect. I mean, I think that connection piece is almost as fundamental as air for humans. Like, especially, like you were saying, to find people who understand your particular circumstances is not easy. Anyway, thank you for highlighting that part. Thank you.
I want to jump in and say, I wish we all had a Peggy in our lives. And it's just someone it sounds like someone who can bounce your ideas off of, who is, with you through the struggle and the journey of professional behavior, but also just a parent, but, has that same passion. And I think we have that a lot in our colleagues. But speaking to the book and behavior analysts, it's such a great perspective that you said the landscape of our field has changed, and it has, and it's going to continue to change. And I think there is this, if you started in the field a few decades ago, it was a very different world. We worked, and I know I say this often on the podcast, but I worked directly for parents. I was hired and trained by parents who brought in a clinician. So my entire worldview was around what the family struggle was, what their priority was. And this was long before insurance reform. But for clinicians today who are out there, a lot of them work in, with autism, with funding sources, whether that be, Medicaid or privatized insurance. And I think there are a lot of requirements on these individuals who, and I can go on and on about this. I know Shannon's heard me talk about empathy and compassion, and that we believe that behavior analysis is a human helping service where we are compassionate individuals. But there is some research out there that indicates maybe we aren't, right? Maybe some of us are here because we have that helping need. And some of us, this is a career path we ended up upon after starting in a different trajectory in undergrad. But I think that this book and you talking about the landscape and the vantage point allows those clinicians today that maybe have a different trajectory, that connection piece that, the parent is on. I love how you mentioned this lifespan view. I'm a parent of children who are entering their teens. I've got a middle teenager and then a preteen and then another one who just turned teen. And it is a whole different ballgame at this stage. They're not babies anymore. They barely need you. They need you for the bank account and the car and, just to make sure they stay alive. But you start to have these visions of this world without them. Without them here in the home. And did you prepare them? Are they well equipped? And I think this view from the lifespan, it's so existential as a parent. And the parents that we are serving as behavior analysts, they're having this exact same realization at very different points. It could be early on, it could be later, it could be at the exact same time. And if you are a clinician serving individuals with a diagnosis, it is so important to be able to step into their shoes and to understand that this is so important for their lives. For the services might be 1 year, you might move on, you might change organizations, but you, as individuals who have selected this career, it's so important that we continue to see the parent for who they are to that child throughout, not just the services provided, but throughout their life.
That stepping into shoes is such a skill, like perspective taking and also asking. Like I think you were talking in the beginning about, like when you go into an FBA, what is the child thinking? And oftentimes we don't even know ways to ask. We don't know ways to ask the parent. We don't know ways to ask the child, ways to observe. So I think that's even a skill to be developed. And also, I guess I want to, because this is something I think about a lot. And part of it's because, I was the 99th person certified in the whole world. My number is 199, or I was the 75th. I'm sorry. It was 1999. I was number 75. But, and I was a behavior analyst for many years before that. So watching how the field has changed and how we've, I hope, continued to interrogate the way we do things, how we do them. But I do think the exercises to co-create, to collaborate, to have shared purpose with the people we're working with is something we're going to keep learning about. I think as humans, this is something our whole species is learning about, like how we learn to work together for common well-being. I think that's complicated. And, I know that there's a lot of tension and nervousness and fear right now because there are things going on in the world that are quite upsetting. But I always think back, one of my mentors, Todd Risley, he always said crises are opportunities. And in some ways they are. Like, it's not till the teenager throws the TV through the window that you think, oh, maybe we should do maybe this isn't working for him. So like I don't like the TV going through the window, but I also think, well, if it's gone through the window, first of all, we can think about what to do about this situation, but then we can think about, well, maybe when the other kids are 2, we should think about what would prevent TVs going through the window. And I think what would prevent a family from falling apart, what would prevent estrangement and isolation, what would prevent, all the things that happen that we could figure out ways for them not to happen, but also for quality of life for both the child and the family to increase. And I think I love the movements that have caused our field to figure out our relationship with social validity, because I think it's been a tenuous one from the beginning, and it's a hard one because we were a science that started out, you know, being objective and being a natural science was a response to a set of conditions that were not good, that left people with very little hope or change. And that emphasis on the natural science approach produced a lot of important things, and it produced a lot of tensions. And so then we didn't know what our relationship with the subjective was. I think we're still working that out in complicated ways. Mott Wolf, of course, was the first one who started exploring that formally, but it is a continuing conversation that sort of pops up when there's a crisis and subsides, and then it's popped up again. And I think I like to think about this. I read this article in Scientific American, and it was about engineers who were just fascinated by squid beaks. Apparently, squid beaks are both hard and soft. And engineers are trying to figure out, how do you, like, what are the physics of making something hard and soft? And I think in a way, and I'm going to be talking about this at APBA, I think in a way, that's what we're wrestling with now. How do we be both a hard science and a soft science? I don't like when people say we're a hard science, we're not a soft science. It's like, well, I'm a soft science.
And true. Yeah.
I think that's actually, I love the humanities. I love the social sciences. I think there are things to understand there that make a difference for the beautiful people we work with. So
I think that as parents, one of the things that I struggled with when we started ABA is the relation to ethics. And this person was coming into my home. They were practically a member of my family. And then there were things like I couldn't give a Christmas card, right? Which things have changed now, right? Things have changed now, but that, like, I used to go over and I would sneak it into their bag while they were working with Asher. I would just pop it in there. I wouldn't get any gift cards or anything, just the Christmas. Because I didn't want them to get in trouble, but I wanted them to know how much I appreciated them. Right. So I think that's the hard and soft of it, right? Is they are working with my child and trying to remain objective, but there's the human aspect of, we had this relationship, and even now, it's something where you are a member of the community that I've built around my child. Yeah. And you can see the love that they have for him, and the care and the compassion, and the care and compassion they have towards me as well as I with them. And so it has to balance at some point, we have to realize it's just going to be there. So.
And figure out how to harmonize it. Mm-hmm. I mean, if a person is coming to work with the most precious person in your whole universe, like, you would like them to like your child. You would like them to love your child. Mm-hmm. And you would like to express your appreciation. Mm-hmm. And I do think, of course, you don't want people bribing people to treat your child better than other people. But I don't think that's what parents are trying to do. No. Like, I am still, even with my grandkid, I'm the one who wants to get presents for all the teachers who've been so awesome to her all year, and for the ballet instructor and this one and that. Because also culturally, I learned, like, in my world, you leave money to teachers because that's how esteemed they are culturally and how revered they are. So, like, I think rather than saying, no, it's separate, it's like, no, grapple with the complexity of it. Grapple with what it means to love and what the different conditions are. Like, we're not talking about having affairs, like, with the parents. Like, it's not that kind of love. Like, I think that's the other thing is, I do think in parts of our society, like, we've gotten a little bit weird about our definitions of love. Like, it's always like this sexual thing or something like that, when there's a whole lot of other kinds of love. And thinking about when and how that is involved in the beautiful work we do, I think is really critical. Like, that is a great example about the Christmas card.
Yeah. I'm going to throw in another word now for secret words for CEU seekers, and I'm going to hijack what you just said and go with complexity. And the reason, I want to dive into that just for a minute, because I don't think that in behavior analysis, we're very comfortable with complexity a lot of the time. And I know it's a growing field. And when I think about it from an ontological perspective, yes, it's easier to start with the smaller skill sets and then build towards that. But even on what we call the soft skills, which we should call the hard skills, we struggle because this is complex. Speaking of soft and hard, maybe we'll call them the squid skills.
I love it. You know what?
Now on.
I'm going to teach you the squid skills.
Yeah. And, we have a young workforce by and large. And Shahla, as you and I talked about in the pre-interview, there's a lot of them ramping up when they first come in. So what can we do to help from a training standpoint?
Oh, I have so many thoughts. I think the first one is, and this is something I started realizing recently or appreciating recently, that, and part of it has to do with my own kids, like we were talking about at the beginning, my own kids teaching me. But I think one of the first things to realize, like we've all seen that graph of like how fast that are certified and out in the workforce. But I think one thing to realize is, for the most part, they are enthusiastic, they're hopeful, and they have a lot of energy. Now, they may be novices, and part of everything we know, like looking at how wisdom and expertise develops, when you're a novice, things are very black and white, never reinforce, never punish, never, or always, 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 So part of that is just when any of us are first learning something, we're very rule-based and we're very black and white. But we have a lot of motivation and a lot of energy. Like I look at the 24-year-old who just become a BCBA, she can get down on the ground a lot better than I can. And, she can go running and play chase, or he can go running or play chase. They can go running and play chase, so all of the things that they bring to it. And they're also sometimes more hopeful than someone who's more experienced. Like, what can we achieve? We can, fly to the moon. Of course we can. But you know what? If you think you can fly to the moon, you might be able to fly, I don't know, to Mars, or something, or at least to the next city, where if you shoot down everything, it limits possibility. So I think it's important to remember all of that. I think also to help them learn, and Peggy and I talk about this a lot in the book, learn that there are like levels to this. As a parent looking for people to support you, but also as a parent, like, we're not a species that pops out of the womb knowing how to parent. That's not how it works. Like, I think I can see you shaking your heads. We all learn to parent. We relied on our communities to help us, and we develop skills and wisdom. And the BCBAs have to recognize the same thing. They are learning to be BCBAs. They're learning about behavior change. And I think with experience and with a community that helps you, you also learn that complexity exists, and that as things become less in black and white and more conditional, that you start to learn to make decisions and harmonize complex things. So I think we have a young workforce and an inexperienced workforce with some really good assets, because in addition to the energy, the other thing they bring in, I think, is they bring in, like, I love that you said TikTok. They bring in TikTok. They bring in what the conversations are in terms of social justice, in terms of equity, inclusion, in terms of technology. So they're also bringing in a lot, and all of us figuring out how to harmonize all of that is, I think, part of the process. I'll just say this one last thing about that. And I will say, when you were asking your question, I texted my student and told her I'm going to be a little bit late. So, but the other thing I think that's important to understand is that our field is so beautiful, and it was developed in such a beautiful way. Like Walden 2 was the first book I read in behavior analysis when I was in high school. And it changed like the idea that we could be a science and art-based society, because there were a lot of arts in Walden 2. There was time for the arts. But that was kind of what inspired me along this road. And most of who developed our field were from a very particular demographic and a very particular way of being. And most of them didn't look like us. And so I think that that inclusion of other ways, of I love womanist and feminist philosophies, but looking at how that influences how we look at a science of behavior, looking at people from the global South who are generally not included in what happens in the scholarship and research. In psychology, they have a name for it. It's called WEIRD, Western Educated, Industrial, Rich, and Democratic. So it's, it doesn't mean our evidence base or our concepts are wrong. It just means they're just one piece that a lot of other people haven't contributed to. And I do think I'm going to call it the mother voice is a voice that's not heavy in what is happening. I think Mott Wolf had a beautiful mother voice, but so I don't think it necessarily has to be one gender, but I do think there's something about the softness and the sense of the care, and the love that is involved and should be part of science. Any science, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I mean, we talk about this with the medical profession a lot that, maybe I don't care so much if my surgeon has a good bedside manner because I'm not going to be awake while he or she is doing their thing. But at the same time, I think that they've definitely faced some of the same obstacles and maybe some that we don't have to, like having to come in the room and be in and out in 15 minutes with a diagnosis and the prescription and all of that. At least that's not what we're having to do. We often hold the medical profession up as this is who we're striving towards, but there's also some ways I think we don't want to strive towards that. And we're not unique in terms of we're using science to deal with human beings and to improve the human condition.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of times I think we're more like nurses, because nurses have to have the science background and they also have to have the people understanding and they have to have the care and compassion. And they also have to be able to multitask and be able to think on many, many levels at once. Their nurses are incredible. I think because it's largely a female dominated profession, I don't think they're regarded as highly as physicians or, so I think there's a whole issue there. But I also think, and I saw this, and I wish I remember her name. I always feel bad. I watched so many webinars during the pandemic, but I went to this webinar and she was a biologist and she was Puerto Rican and she was talking about how positionality matters and representation in the sciences matter. And, I think I had a very limited idea of that. And I was developing an idea about all of that. And we have a paper that Dr. Malika Pritchett and I and other colleagues wrote that I would highly recommend. But it's about social justice and applied behavior analysis. And we talk about positionality. But what this biologist said is she said, it affects your research questions. What your positionality is. How it's not only how you approach the science, but even what your questions are. And then she gave this incredible example of a research program that was really systemic rather than targeted on one thing. It was definitely a systems perspective of ecology and biology that was different. And she talked about how that was part of her positionality as a Puerto Rican woman who was a scientist and how that different lens changed the way she looked at things. And I think that, again, with people coming in from many areas into this discipline, we're getting new lenses and new ways of looking at things, which I think is incredibly wonderful and important.
That's exciting. All right. I'm going to do the last secret word. Experience. Experience. Well, I guess we need to start winding this down because we're not allowed to keep you all day, although I'm nowhere near done with this conversation. But Nissa, Jamie, anything that you guys been holding back? Haven't had a chance to say yet?
I mean, I could listen all day to you speak, Shahla. I think this has been fantastic. And honestly, a deep dive into the book would be fantastic. Even just components of it that I think people could walk away with, from the parent perspective and from the clinician perspective, would be super helpful. And I know, we're a field that everyone loves their takeaways or their quick tips, but it's such an important message that we need to continue to communicate at both sides. I think that for parents to understand that we are grappling with this, that this is something we do want to do as clinicians. We want to hear their side and support them and understand them and love them in a way that maybe in the last couple of decades as clinicians we weren't supposed to do. But I think we're in a place in our field now where we can say that we love our clients and their families in a way that we are providing the best care possible when we are in front of them. So I think this we could go on and on.
Absolutely.
I would love another conversation.
And I think on the flip side of that, what's really interesting is as we're moving further into in-clinic services, I feel like the caregivers, especially the ones that are coming new into diagnosis, are feeling more separated from the providers. And so I think continuing this conversation, having them read this book would put into perspective what they should actually be doing and thinking about. And I will often say, no one tells them that this service isn't available to you forever, that you need to learn from these providers so that you have these skills. And I think that if everyone works together, they'll have those skills to go and continue on as their child becomes an adult. So it's very important. We're just being a little bit removed from the situation because it's not in our home anymore. So.
I want to amplify that because that, I actually think that's something we should be very concerned about. I'm not saying we should go back into the home, and I think it all depends, and we talk about that in the book, but I want to amplify that parents are not only part of it, they are it. Like it is theirs. And we are part of it. Like, I think that's a whole different shift. And I actually think we really have to reconsider the physical structure of many of the new clinics. Like, there's literally a barrier and locks, and there's not easy access to parents to be part of that environment. And honestly, as a parent, I think I'd be a little bit like, I'm not sure if I want to do that, because I don't want to be in places that say I can't see or be part of them. That makes me nervous. And I think that it also means I'm not part of it.
Yeah.
So, somehow for us to reconceptualize, and I understand part of the reasons why, the safety and confidentiality, but even some of that, like the dentist office doesn't do that. I really think we have to think about that carefully. And I think it's much more problematic than we think it is. I think it's a barrier that shuts parents out, and it's one that scares me a little bit.
And I don't even think that that's just us, because as you're talking about that, it's reminding me of a friend of mine who still has a child in school. Oh, well, they go to a private school. But I think after the COVID situation and then bringing people back, and then we're closing and preventing access and that sort of thing, has turned into a cultural thing now, where I'm sorry if I'm paying, even if I'm not, it's public school. This is my child. If I want to come in the doors and talk to the teacher and the principal, I should be allowed to do that. And definitely the same thing. How are these parents going to learn in these ABA clinics if they don't see the services being rendered?
when there's a problem with generalization and maintenance and,
And
truly-
social validity.
Social
Like,
validity.
coming
you
under
know,
the
like
conditions
I
that
think the
learn-
pandemic happened and people are like, "You're doing what with my child?"
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you don't even know it, but you've lit my fire. I usually cannot withstand not invitation to talk about social validity, but I have to because we're at the end of this of our time together. But you very well may be hearing from us again just to talk about that. But I want to thank you for coming, and Jamie, absolutely I knew that we needed you in this, and we did.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next time on the Behavioral View. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for the Behavioral View. Ready to lock in your CEU? Just follow the link below, complete the quiz, and enter the secret words. It's that easy. You've already done the work, so why not take the credit? Subscribe and join us for the next episode. We'll see you soon.